I noticed Donna just put a big, really big amount in her mouth. She's not even concerned that she's eating while we're going to sing. She's not concerned one. All right, let's sing 335. We won't stand because y'all are eating, and I'm not going to be standing. So, yeah, it doesn't mean we have to stand to sing the song. 335, Standing on the Promises. Sing it now. Standing on the promises of Christ my King, through eternal ages let his praises ring. Glory in the highest I will shout and sing, standing on the promises of God. Standing on the promises of God, my Savior. I'm standing on the promises of God, standing on the promises I cannot fail. When the howling storms come down and fear assail, by the living word of God I shall prevail. Standing on the promises of God, standing on the promises of God, my Savior. I'm standing on the promises of God. On the last verse now. Standing on the promises I cannot fall, listening every moment to the Spirit's call, resting in my Savior as my all in all. Standing on the promises of God. Standing on the promises of Christ my Savior. I'm standing on the promises of God. 346, everybody knows this. We don't really need the book, but we'll sing it. You can't. That's right, way back in the day, 346, it's still in the hymn book. It's still there. He's got the whole world in his hands. 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 He's got the wind and the rain in his hands. He's got the wind and the rain in his hands. He's got the wind and the rain in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the little tiny baby in his hands. He's got the little tiny baby in his hands. He's got the little tiny baby in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got everybody here in his hands. He's got everybody here in his hands. He's got everybody here in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
All right. How many of you believe that? Okay. When you're in your darkest hour, when it seems like heaven is not paying any attention, it seems like you're all alone in the world, how many believe that? That's right. It's always true, whether you believe it or not. Suzanne has a niece that wrote a song. She's wrote several songs, but one of them in particular is called "The Moon is Round." It's like, what? You listen to the words, and it said, no matter what you see in the sky, whether it's a crescent, whether it's a sliver, no matter what it looks like, whether it's not there at all, doesn't change the fact that the moon is round. Right? So it doesn't matter what God appears to be at any given moment, he is who he said he was. So he's got you in his hands. That's right. Couple of quick things that I wanted to mention. Martha Horton's memorial service is going to be next Tuesday at 10 o'clock. And I need to let the church know a couple things. The most important thing I need you to know, because I want us to all respond appropriately, is the family has requested. Okay, let me back up. I think it was about 2 weeks before Martha passed that she got word that her brother passed. Okay? Her brother, the only family he has was estranged. He was living in a assisted or a independent living type home. He had really nobody but her, and then some of the relatives from California. Martha was the only one that could make decisions for his burial and everything else, and she was never able to. So the family has requested that this be a combined memorial service for Martha and her brother. I told them I've met her brother one time. No one in this church knows him, but we would certainly be willing to honor him as well. But I said, we'll be partial to Martha. So just so you'll know, when you get the program, it will have pictures of both of them on there. There's going to be an obituary for both of them. So I just wanted the church to be aware so that that's not a shock factor. But anyway, so the other thing I need you to know is she's going to be buried with Billy, of course, at the National Cemetery. So we will be on a schedule like we were with Billy. So I just wanted to let everybody kind of know the game plan. I'm meeting with them tomorrow about specifics, but I wanted y'all to know that much. A couple other events that are on the back of the prayer sheet that you need to be aware of. Other than that, let me just also tell you that I've been in contact with Sandra Woodard. Woody had a great day yesterday. Thought he was coming home today. Didn't have as good a day today. They called her in at 2:15 this morning because they needed to get some tests run, and he was not letting them. And so she said she brought a bag. She's there for the duration, and so just pray for Woody and Sandra. Peace and stamina for her and her daughter who are doing the heavy lifting, and then for Woody's doctors that they'll have some wisdom about what to test and what to find. So just that's the prayer there. Wanted to let y'all know those couple things before we get started, and then we'll get to more prayer requests as we get to the end. But this evening, I'd like you to turn to the 9th chapter of the book of Hosea. We're working our way through the book of Hosea. Hosea is easy to find because, of course, you know the 5 big prophets, right? Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentation, Ezekiel, Daniel. Any of the other ones, Hosea is before that. So it's right after Daniel. It's the first one of what we call the minor prophets. And Hosea is probably one of the longer ones of the minor prophets. I mentioned before that it appears that Hosea is longer than Daniel, but it's not. It has more chapters and verses, but not as many words. So by a lot, actually. So Hosea is a minor prophet. This evening we're going to finish looking at the second of the 3, the 3 indictments that are found in verse 1 of chapter 4. There were the 3 indictments given, and so we kind of started looking at the lack of the knowledge of God. And then we're going to take 2 Wednesdays on kindness, no kindness, and we'll get to that in a second. And then next week we'll come back and we'll look at no faithfulness. So that's kind of where we are, and then we'll close up the series the following week with some final thoughts. But we're going to finish looking at these the second of the indictments, and beginning with the house of Jeroboam, followed by the house of Baasha, followed by the house of Ahab, followed by the house of Jehu. Those are the four main dynasties per se. They were kind of short to be called a dynasty, but those were the four main dynasties of the northern kingdom of Israel after the split with Solomon's son Rehoboam splitting with Jeroboam. So those are the four main houses over the northern kingdom of Israel. And in all four houses, plus the little ones in between, there were no kings whatsoever that honored God. None. Zilch. Nada. No kings that honored God. They never stopped worshiping the golden calves that Jeroboam the first had set up. If you'll remember the story, Jeroboam and Rehoboam split ways, and Jeroboam didn't want his constituency traveling to Jerusalem for festivals because he was afraid he was going to lose control. So he set up his own centers of worship. One was in Bethel, one was in Dan. Dan is the farthest north city in Israel, and then Bethel was south toward the border of the northern and southern kingdom. And so what he did is he set up golden calves in both places and said, this is where you worship. Golden calves apparently were supposed to represent Yahweh, okay? Because that's what they did coming out of Egypt, right? They said, Moses is gone. We're never going to get him back. Aaron, make us a golden calf to represent the God who freed us from Egypt. That didn't last very long. Well, Jeroboam's calves lasted a long time. And it was terrible. Now, there were other gods that they would worship that would come and go with the rise and fall of cultures around them. There were different Baals and Ashtaroths and all this kind of stuff. And certain kings would come in and wipe those out. But they wouldn't wipe out the calves. The golden calves stayed. And so you'll see throughout, we're reading in 2 Kings right now in our Bible reading, you'll see throughout it says they may have done this, 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 and this, but they never got away from the sins of Jeroboam, the golden calves. And so the whole country was nauseous to God, basically. Because not only would they worship these golden calves and then whatever else God was, fancy at the time, anytime they found themselves in a bind and nothing they did seemed to work, somebody would bring up Yahweh. It's like, oh yeah, we have Yahweh. He's helped us before. Oh Yahweh, we are so sorry. We are so sorry. We are in sackcloth and ashes. We will, and God's, okay, I will help you. Whew, glad that's over. Now, back to Baal. It was over and over and over that way. In our Bible reading, like I said, we're in 2 Kings 8 through 17 this week. And that details a lot that was going on leading up to the time of Hosea. So it gives you a good feel for how bad it really was. And understanding what God had promised, understanding what God had promised them if they would only be faithful, and then seeing what they did. God's patience is mind-boggling. His patience is mind-boggling. Aren't you glad? Well, through the prophet Hosea, God revealed to them that the only way they might approach understanding the offense was to compare it to adultery. That's the closest we can get to the hurt, to the, just the emotion of what has been done to God. Well, though God's promise to Abraham was unconditional and unwavering, and I'm going back over a few things just to kind of, these are important aspects as we look at Hosea. Though God's promise to Abraham was unconditional and unwavering, his promise to individual descendants of Abraham was not. Okay? And through Moses, God gave the ultimatum. If they were faithful to him, the blessings would pour out on them beyond their wildest dreams. When you read about the promises, if they would just be faithful to God, it was like utopia. However, at the end of Deuteronomy 30, God said this, and I quote, "But if your heart turns away and you will not obey, but are drawn away and worship other gods and serve them, I declare to you today that you shall surely perish." Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Well, the time had come for the northern kingdom to perish. Bottom line. And Hosea was sent to warn them that their end was now imminent because of the three things that he listed in chapter 4, verse 1. There was no faithfulness among them. There was no kindness or loyal love among them. And there was absolutely no knowledge of God in the land. So Hosea spent chapters 4, 5, and the beginning of 6 covering the indictment of no knowledge. And then he covered the indictment of no loyal love or no kindness in chapters 6 through 10. That's the indictment that we started last week, and tonight we're just going to look at chapters 9 and 10. Last week I mentioned that the Hebrew word that's translated kindness is the Hebrew word chesed. You got to do it in the back of your throat, chesed, which is, when it's used toward God, it's translated loving kindness. But kindness is a very good translation, but I think it's more than that. This is in the context of marriage. The kindness that a wife would show her husband because she's loyal to him. That's the picture, because he was comparing Israel to Gomer, remember? And Gomer had no loyal kindness to Hosea whatsoever. She cheated on him every chance she got. Well, that's exactly what Israel was doing. There was no loving kindness. There was no kindness. So where last week we saw their betrayal of God in place of their kindness, as we arrive in chapter 9, we're going to see the consequences of their betrayal. So first, the first point, long runway coming in, but the first point is the rolling back to Egypt. You'll understand why I said it that way in just a moment. But the rolling back to Egypt. Now, in order to understand that, it helps to remember some of the milestones in the history of Israel. When Joshua led the children of Israel across the Jordan River, okay, the first battle that they did was Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, right? So, but between going across the Jordan and the walls come a-tumbling down, there were some things that happened. And they came together as they had to do some nation-building things, okay? They were now in the Promised Land. Over the Jordan, they were now officially in the Promised Land. And so the first thing they did is Joshua made sure that every man was circumcised. That was a party. And then they waited for the men to heal, and then they held Passover. First time of holding Passover in the new land, in the Promised Land. And then they got to eat some of the produce of the land. And the moment they started eating the produce of the land, something stopped. What? Manna. Manna stopped. Never to be seen again until we see it in heaven. But the manna stopped because they were receiving the produce of the land, okay? But in the midst of all that, God told Joshua, and if you're taking notes, jot down Joshua 5, verse 9. In the midst of all that, God told Joshua that he had officially rolled away the reproach of Egypt from his people. It rolled away the reproach of Egypt from his people. In fact, from the Hebrew for rolled away, which is a word gil, they did a play on words and they named that spot Gilgal. Okay, that's where the name of the place came from God proclaiming that he had rolled away the reproach from Egypt. For the rest of Joshua's life, Gilgal became kind of a base of operations. As you go through the book of Joshua, you'll see, let's go to Gilgal, and we'll meet in Gilgal. And fast forward 300 to 400 years or so to the time of Samuel. When Samuel hesitantly anointed Saul as the first official king of Israel, guess where he wanted to have the ceremony? Gilgal, right. And in 1 Samuel 11:14, this is why. He said specifically that they would renew the kingdom there. You see, it was almost as to say, we started here with God as our king, but now you want to start over. So we're starting over at the place where we started originally, at Gilgal. We're starting over, but this time looking just like everyone else with a mere human king, as if that was somehow better. Samuel knew it wasn't. God knew it wasn't. But Israel was so convinced that they needed to be like everybody else. And so they got to go back to Gilgal, and that's where Saul was anointed. So keep all that in mind as we read references to Egypt and Gilgal in chapter 9. What I want to do is I want to read all the way through chapter 9, listen for those, see if you can kind of make sense of it as we read, and then we'll kind of bring out a few things. So look at chapter 9, verse 1. It says, "Do not rejoice, O Israel, with exultation like the nations, for you have played the harlot, forsaking your God. You have loved harlots' earnings on every threshing floor. Threshing floor and winepress will not feed them, and the new wine will fail them. They will not remain in the Lord's land, but Ephraim will return to Egypt, and in Assyria they will eat unclean food. They will not pour out drink offerings of wine to the Lord. Their sacrifices will not please him. Their bread will be like mourners' bread. All who eat of it will be defiled, for their bread will be for themselves alone. It will not enter the house of the Lord. What will you do on the day of the appointed festival and on the day of the feast of the Lord? For behold, they will go because of the destruction. Egypt will gather them up. Memphis will bury them. Weeds will take over their treasures of silver. Thorns will be in their tents. The days of punishment have come. The days of retribution have come. Let Israel know this. The prophet is a fool. The inspired man is demented because of the grossness of your iniquity and because your hostility is so great. Ephraim was a watchman with my God, a prophet, yet the snare of a birdcatcher is in all his ways. And there is only hostility in the house of his God. They have gone deep in depravity as the days of Gibeah. He will remember their iniquity. He will punish their sins. I found Israel like grapes in the wilderness. I saw your forefathers as the earliest fruit on the fig tree in its first season. But they came to Baal Peor and devoted themselves to shame. And they became as detestable as that which they loved. As for Ephraim, their glory will fly away like a bird. No birth, no pregnancy, and no conception. Though they bring up their children, yet I will bereave them until not a man is left. Yes, woe to them indeed when I depart from them. Ephraim, as I have seen, is planted in a pleasant meadow like Tyre, but Ephraim will bring out his children for slaughter. Give them, O Lord. What will you give? Give them a miscarrying womb and dry breasts. All their evil is at Gilgal. Indeed, I came to hate them there because of the wickedness of their deeds. I will drive them out of my house. I will love them no more. All their princes are rebels. Ephraim is stricken, their root is dried up. They will bear no fruit, even though they bear children. I will slay the precious ones of their womb. My God will cast them away because they have not listened to him, and they will be wanderers among the nations. I cannot imagine getting that pronouncement from Yahweh. I cannot imagine hearing those words from the lips of our Lord. Okay, so let's just kind of go back and pick up a couple of things and look at them closer. But from a bird's eye view, do you see what was happening? When their ancestors had arrived with Joshua, right? When their ancestors had arrived in the place they called Gilgal, there was hope in the air, and God's blessing had been was being revealed. All the horrors of Egypt and all the wilderness wandering was in their rearview mirror, having been rolled away. But now they had played the harlot for the last time, and God was returning them to Egypt. Return to Cedar. God was returning them to Egypt and a life of wandering, not in the wilderness, but among the nations. Now, I think God was telling them that they'd gone full circle. And now, because of their adultery, they were returning to the exact place where their ancestors started, but this time with no hope. When they came in Gilgal, there was nothing but hope. When God was sending them back to Gilgal, it was without hope. So let's look a little closer as we look at verse 1. It says, you played the harlot, forsaking your God, and you have loved harlots' earnings on every threshing floor. In the Canaanite culture, threshing floors and wine presses were, of course, very significant for agricultural reasons, right? For physical needs. The threshing floor was where you took the raw, the wheat, and you threshed it so that you could get the grain from which to make bread. In the wine press, that's where you took the grapes and you were able to press it. And wine was such an important. They didn't have filters back then, right? They didn't have filtered water, so the alcohol helped purify their whatever they drank. So the wine process was very important. So those two things were extremely important agriculturally. But think in terms of Canaanite culture, because they also saw them as they saw them as necessary for life. Therefore, they were sacred, and the gods must be appeased that were in control. So, because that's where the wheat was taken care of and the grapes were taken care of, it fell into the category of fertility gods. Baal was a fertility god. When we got a chance to go through the Vatican several months ago, here's a Catholic church, right? And it's the third biggest museum in the world. So there's ancient Greek and Roman gods everywhere because that's archaeology. And we saw more fertility gods than I'd care to think of. That was a big deal. Because they were fertility gods, regularly when they were using them when they weren't using the threshing floor for physical purposes of threshing the wheat, they were performing sacred rituals on them in hopes of pleasing the fertility gods. Among those rituals were actively involved prostitutes. We'll leave it there. But that's what the threshing floors, that's how you celebrated the gods of fertility on the threshing floors, okay? That explains the wording of verse 1, where he says, you have loved harlots' earnings on every threshing floor. But God assured them in verse 2 that he would see to it that their threshing floor and winepress failed. Now, what was God doing there? these gods that you have been so vulgar in your worship have nothing to do with your grain and your wine. That comes from me. He said, I will see to it. I don't care what you do. I will see to it that it does not produce what you need. And they would return to the status that their ancestors held in Egypt. They would roll back to Egypt. Now, I need to make sure you understand. He wasn't talking about physically going to Egypt, okay? He's talking about going back to the status that they were in Egypt. Okay? And then he lowered the boom. He told them who they would serve. In the same way they served Egypt, who would they serve? In the very next line, the actual one would be Assyria, where they would wind up, but the effect would be the same as when they were in Egypt. Now, Assyria didn't have them in nationwide slavery like Egypt did, but the point was clear. You forfeited your blessing. You're about to go to Assyria. Now, at that point, Assyria was a friend. Assyria was one that they would call on. They would send bukus of gold to help them against their enemies. And Hosea was saying, you're going to go back to Egypt, and it's going to be at the hands of the Assyrians. Why? Because he said point blank, the days of punishment had come. It was time for God to pull the plug on their connection to the promise of Abraham. They were toast. Now, notice verse 9. To explain the depth of their depravity, God compared them to Gibeah. Anybody remember of anything that happened in a town called Gibeah? I'm not going to go into detail, but the account of the town of Gibeah, Gibeah was of the allotment of the tribe of Benjamin. Okay, so it was a city in the tribe of Benjamin. And the sordid story is found in Judges 19 and 20, if you want to jot that down. We're not going to go into detail right now, but this would not be a story that you want to read to your grandchildren, okay? This is, there's a lot of stories in the Bible that are great for bedtime stories. There are a whole bunch of them that aren't. This is one of them that isn't, okay? Suffice it to say, this is a story among the descendants of Abraham that almost makes Sodom and Gomorrah look normal. But it was done within Israel by Israelites to Israelites. Judges 19 and 20. If God wanted to talk about their depravity, that's where he went. God told them through Hosea that almost from the time that God took Israel through the wilderness, they started playing the harlot at Baal Peor. He mentioned that. Now, what's that? That account, if you're taking notes, is found in Numbers 25, when several Hebrews, now this blows my mind, wilderness, beginning of the wilderness wanderings, they heard God's voice themselves. Okay? It wasn't like Charlton Heston where they heard God themselves. They saw the manifestation of God on the mountain as it was filled with smoke and fire and thunder. Okay? They had that in their memory banks. In Numbers 25, they found some daughters of Moab that looked attractive. And they said, hey, can I go serve your God with you? You little flirt. As a result, 24,000 of the descendants of Abraham died that day. 24,000 died that day. Now, the people of the northern kingdom of Israel, by their actions, had asked for God's judgment, and they were going to get it. Because if you want to talk about how ugly they were, those are the two stories that God brought up and said, okay, you saw what I did to them, get ready. It's coming. Gilgal had now become a symbol of them rolling back to Egypt. And God was going to see to it that they became wanderers again, but wanderers among the nations. You know, even to this day, there are, I don't know how many, but there are a lot of Jews still wandering around the nations. Now they're going back. It's amazing, the influx of Jews into the land of Israel, but they're still wandering through the nations. Well, I'm taking longer than I wanted. Hosea closed this section declaring that misplaced loyalty leads to destruction. That's chapter 10. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell you. Chapter 10 has given translators fits. The Hebrew is very vague in a lot of it. It's very difficult. And so as I read through chapter 10, if you're reading something other than the New American Standard, you may notice some differences. So I just kind of give that as a warning. So let me just start, and I want to just read all 15 verses, and then we'll comment quickly. Israel is a luxuriant vine. He produces fruit for himself. The more his fruit, the more altars he made. The richer his land, the better he made the sacred pillars. Their heart is faithless. Now they must bear their guilt. The Lord will break down their altars and destroy their sacred pillars. Surely now they will say, we have no king, for we do not revere the Lord. As for the king, what can he do for us? They speak mere words. With worthless oaths they make covenants, and judgment sprouts like poisonous weeds in the furrows of the field. The inhabitants of Samaria will fear, for the calf of Bethaven, now remember Bethaven we think is Bethel. The calf of Bethel, indeed its people will mourn for it, and its idolatrous priests will cry over its glory, since it has departed from it. The thing itself will be carried to Assyria as tribute to King Jareb. Ephraim will be seized with shame, and Israel will be ashamed of its own counsel. Samaria will be cut off with her king like a stick on the surface of the water. Also the high places of Aven, the sin of Israel, will be destroyed. Thorn and thistle will grow on their altars. Then they will say to the mountains, cover us, and to the hills, fall on us. From the days of Gibeah you have sinned, O Israel. There they stand. Will not the battle against the sons of iniquity overtake them in Gibeah? When it is my desire, I will chastise them, and the peoples will be gathered against them when they are bound for their double guilt. Ephraim is a trained heifer that loves to thresh, but I will come over her fair neck with a yoke. I will harness Ephraim. Judah will plow. Jacob will harrow for himself. Sow with a view to righteousness. Reap in accordance with kindness. Break up your fallow ground, for it is time to seek the Lord until he comes to rain righteousness on you. You have plowed wickedness, you have reaped injustice. You have eaten the fruit of lies because you have trusted in your way, in your numerous warriors. Therefore a tumult will arise among your people, and all your fortresses will be destroyed, as Shalman destroyed Beth-arbel on the day of battle, when mothers were dashed in pieces with their children. Thus it will be done to you at Bethel because of your great wickedness. At dawn the king of Israel will be completely cut off. Now that's a tough chapter. Not just because of the content. I mean, that's pretty rough, but also just the difficulty of the Hebrew. And Hebrew is not my thing. So, but the commentaries I read talked about the difficulty it was to translate that. But suffice it to say, the fact that God called Israel a luxuriant vine was not a compliment. It sounds like a compliment. When I lived in Virginia, you could drive down the road. Trees were right here. It's very claustrophobic in Virginia. But you would see groves of trees that were just covered by this out-of-control vine. Kudzu. A vine called kudzu. It looks luxuriant. It looks healthy. And if you see a grove of trees with kudzu, it just looks like a bush because it is just one solid kudzu plant, and it smothers the trees. Kudzu grows for itself. It doesn't benefit anything. It doesn't benefit anybody. It grows for itself. It's luxuriant, but all the fruit of it is for itself. It just takes up dirt. It takes up nutrients, and it's luxuriant. That's probably what was meant by luxuriant vine. The only fruit that the northern kingdom had produced was arrogant idolatry that had zero benefit for anyone, much less for the glory of God. They placed their hopes on dumb golden calves that were about to be hauled off to Assyria. I mean, how would it be to watch your God be kidnapped and hauled off to a foreign country? That's pretty earth-shattering. That's pretty stupid. but that was, oh no, our God's being kidnapped. They would watch their gods be hauled off to Assyria. There was literally nothing positive that God could say about the northern kingdom. But very quickly, because I'm running long, right as he was bringing this section to a close, I want to bring your attention to verses 11 and 12. He brings Judah into it. He brings them together, calling them Jacob. And look what he says. Let me just read it again. Verse 11. Ephraim is a trained heifer that loves to thresh, but I will come over her fair neck with a yoke. I will harness Ephraim. Judah will plow. Jacob will harrow for himself. And here's the point. Sow with a view to righteousness. Reap in accordance with chesed. That's that kindness, that loyal kindness. Break up your fallow ground, for it is time to seek the Lord until he comes to rain righteousness on you. Notice this exhortation very closely. God never words things by accident. Watch this closely. They were encouraged to not to sow righteousness. They were encouraged to sow with a view to righteousness. There was no expectation on God's part that they would actually produce righteousness. Why? Because since the Garden of Eden, there has not been one human being, save the Son of God, who has ever produced righteousness. We can't. We can't. But that needed to be the view of righteousness needed to be their desire as they sought Yahweh. Notice, the righteousness would actually come when he himself would rain it down on them. I love that. Our only hope is to do our very best to sow with a view to righteousness, placing our faith in him to do the rest. And because of Jesus Christ, he can rain down righteousness on us. I love the book of Hebrews, Hebrews chapter 10, where it talks about how he declares us perfect. He declares us righteous. In other words, he rains righteousness down on us. When I stand before God, and we're going to talk about the Bema seat on Sunday, but when I stand before God, if I'm standing there hoping that he will notice my righteousness, I'm in a world of hurt. But if I stand there knowing that I have been rained down upon with the righteousness of Christ, I'm in good shape. He is and always has been the source of righteousness. Of course, God knew that the northern kingdom was far too gone. They were done. Stick a fork in it, they're done. There was no hope for repentance. He was not going to allow repentance. They had passed their point of no return. So he continued to prophesy the tumult that would arise among them and destroy their fortresses and their utter destruction. But I just want us to pause and consider the incredible mercy of God. Do you know how many hundreds of years God put up with them? Hundreds of years. And God, I can't tell you chapter and verse. I can kind of pick it through the Bible, but I can't give you a verse that says this. But I'm sure God did not destroy them until first he had a remnant from every tribe, and he carefully moved them to Judah. I believe every tribe is represented in the southern kingdom from there on out. There were God-fearers, I believe, in every tribe. Maybe not Dan. For some reason, Dan's left out in the book of Revelation. But Dan's not left out in the book of Ezekiel talking about the millenniums. I don't know. But either way, God always provides or protects a remnant and holds a remnant to himself. But that was Hosea 9 and 10. Any thoughts or questions about that? Yes, Mitch.
When you were talking about in verse 1 of 10,
Yes.
and they were talking about losing God, they were taking God away. And they were saying, oh no, it's like our liberties here in the United States right now. We give up so many liberties, and when we finally get it so bad, then they're going to say, well, what happened to our liberty? We shouldn't be thinking about that then. We should be thinking about it now. It's like somebody losing a child who lets the child go where they want, do what they want, and then they're upset that the child's gone after somebody takes the child. And that's where you see it happening in verse 1. They're not upset really that it's gone, that it's just that it's being taken.
Well, yeah, and because let's face it, their gods were kidnapped, but so were they.
Yes.
So, yeah, interesting. Anything else? All right, let's work on our prayer requests. I mentioned about Martha's family. Just be praying for her. I mentioned about Woody and Sandra, about a little past halfway in box 1. What else? What else is there? Andy.
I can't remember if I mentioned that is still, of course, his journey to salvation. But was had an interview for a new job, and he heard back the other day that he got the job in prison.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. That's fantastic. So we were praying for him to find a job, but also just the main thing is salvation. Fantastic. Becky? Oh, Caroline. I was turned the other way. Kubicek. Kubicek family. Okay. So Jimmy Anders. And the Kubicek family who lost a child, and I guess just a couple weeks ago. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Becky?
Bo, which is Doug and Sandy's brother-in-law, he died.
Oh,
Pray for that family, please.
so Doug's brother-in-law. No. Doug's brother-in-law, what was his name? Do you have a, Bo?
Shirley Ray, the Carlos friend, has to be put on the prayer list. Has she has a heart blockage, EED.
Okay, she's not one of them on here? What's her name?
Shirley Ray.
Shirley Ray. Okay. Shirley Ray, one of DeCarlo's friends.
Norma Capps, she found out, she was having all the catheterization.
Right.
And stuff like that. She did find out she is in heart failure.
Okay,
So she said, please pray for her.
okay.
She said she could
Yeah, yeah.
pray for her.
Okay, okay. So Norma Capps found out that she is in heart failure, but she's at peace. And if you've ever had a chance to talk to Norma Capps, she's, yeah, peace is a good word.
Definitely. Melissa Spradling, actually, remember they sent her, to her little apartment or wherever she's staying right now.
Right.
And then she had to be taken back on Monday. She has some massive infection. They cannot find out where it's from. They're trying every antibiotic in the book, so they have to
Okay.
take back her chemo.
Right, right. So pray for Melissa. She's got an infection that they can't find the source. So bless her heart.
Yeah, and Patricia Hale, box 2, about 6 down.
Yes.
Kent's sister, she did have the cancer surgery Monday, which was on her ear. And he found out today that they actually removed skin, didn't have to remove cartilage. So
Wonderful.
tomorrow, she actually has the skin graft
Oh, that's great.
at 11 in the morning, 11:30.
That's great. So Patricia Hale, about 6 down on box 2, did have surgery on cancer on her ears, but they didn't have to go into the cartilage. So it's just a skin graft. Well, just a skin graft. That's still a big deal, but not anything like. So that's a praise. Okay. Anything else? Oh, one more. No.
And still in box 2, near the 3 from the bottom, Christine, my sister-in-law.
Yes.
She actually went today to a neurologist about all the headaches and everything. And even though in the hospital, they said CAT scans look, there's an aneurysm she still has, they want her to have a second. So he is having to go to get a second opinion regarding the aneurysm and have an MRI.
Okay. So Christine Rios, down toward the bottom of box 2, just continue praying as they try to get to the bottom of what these headaches are. Yeah. You have something, Michael? What you told me about? Oh, yeah. Michael was kind of excited. He got to meet a new friend at the place where he goes twice a week, and found out that she's a Baptist. So that's always good. So that's good. So now he has 2 friends there, that David and Amy. So yes, Andy.
I also remember I want to pray for my former mentor's daughter that he passed away last December. That's how I made contact with his wife. But he was in the hospital as of Sunday with sepsis and pancreatitis, and was scheduled for a surgery on Monday to remove a port and put in a stent in her pancreas.
So what's a name? Just, Emma? Okay. Pray for Emma, as she has some pretty severe, has some pretty severe health issues. So just pray for Emma. Yes, Ernie.
Has anyone heard about what's going on out in California?
Which thing?
Well, one of the things I'm highly concerned about is kids at school. They're trying to get a bill passed, thanks to the governor. I've only seen this 1.5 times, so I don't know all the details. But it's governor's wanting to sign a piece of paper saying that anyone can go in, get your kid and leave, you can come down and kids. If I go in and say, I know Michael, I want to take him out of school, I can go get him. They don't do background
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I believe, and the parent cannot find out anything about what happened,
Well,
and that's going to come across the U.S.
I doubt it.
Well, that's what they're warning.
Yeah. So we just need to pray for our country as well, there are a lot of good people in California, but I'm telling you, anybody that is still a Democrat, I'm sorry, you're not paying attention. If anybody is still a Democrat, you're not paying attention. Every place where Democrats are in charge is horrible. It's horrible. And California is a big example. To give people a permission to take a child out of school without knowing anything about them, but that doesn't surprise me. That's what worries me, is that doesn't surprise me about California. Well, actually, there's only about 4 cities that you just need to move to someplace else. California's a great place, just not, yeah. Yeah. Portland, right. Yeah, Washington the same way. So we just need to pray for our country that it would be the best thing that could happen to this country is for there to be a core of Democrats that stand up and say, we're taking our party back. And I mean, because we could handle Kennedy Democrats, but Obama Democrats, we just can't handle. So there, I said it. IRS gave me permission to say that, by the way. Any other prayer requests? Yeah, we're not gonna get into politics any more than I already have. Yes. Yes. So just under Patricia Hale that we talked about a minute ago, Tim and Brenda Owens. Tim is trying to get he's heard great things about hyperbaric treatments, and everybody agrees that he needs that, but dotting the I's and crossing the T's of insurance is a pain. So just pray that Tim will get that treatment. All right. Yes. It does. Just pray for Gary as he's having to use chemo cream. Yeah, Suzanne's dad had to have it all over his head. Yeah. So just pray that they'll see results from it, because if you're going to be miserable, you might as well see results, right? All right.
Penny Guzman just texted that please pray for her mother. She is very, very.
Okay. Wanda Brown, she's 5 down in box 2. Wanda Brown is just extremely confused tonight, and it's so disheartening to the whole family. So just pray for Wanda and for Tammy and for her family. And along with that, let's pray for Tammy. And Tammy, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but pray for Tammy and her family. Lost her favorite uncle last week, and that was really hard. So just pray for Tammy. Okay. Anything else? All right. Let's have a word of prayer. Make sure you pray for the number on your table, as well as everything that's been mentioned tonight, as well as our government, and don't forget to pray for God's kingdom. The things in that box. And then I'll close.